Good morning, everybody, and welcome to part 2 of our repair and restoration series of the 1988 Coachman Dearborn Edition camper van built on the Ford Econoline 250 chassis. And well, it's going to be an interesting day, probably more so for you watching than me, because it's a day that can usually be filled with frustration. And it's the day we start to deal with the electrical system. One of the big issues here, and one of the reasons that the former owner probably parked this rig, was because it had what we call a parasitic or a vampire electrical drain. In other words, you park the car, you come out the next morning, you had a nice hot battery the night before, you come out the next morning, you turn the key, and you've got, oh, you just got a clicking sound, or maybe nothing at all. And what's happened is your battery has drained overnight, and it's very frustrating. And you go into shops and you pay mechanics to try to chase these things down. It's very difficult. It makes it doubly difficult here in the case of the Coachman RV. It's precisely because we don't just have a van here, we have a van camper. We have a Ford Econoline 250 that was shipped into Elkhart, Indiana. The top was removed, the high top was put on, there was a generator put in, there were all sorts of small electrical hookups that had to be made. So basically you're dealing with two different electrical systems. You have the coach part, which was put in by Coachman, and then you have the Ford part, and those two have to work together. And with double your wiring now over a regular passenger vehicle, you can see why it's very difficult to find out that one area that's drawing power and draining the battery. So it's no wonder that the former owner parked the coach and just said, forget about it, I'm not going to worry about it anymore, and just, you know, I'm done with it, and just park it. So to do this test, it's time consuming, but it should be something that the average person is capable of doing, unless you're not familiar with using a multimeter here, which we're going to be using today. And this is a very good diagnostician tool. You've seen me use it on hi-fi and vintage stereo equipment. What we're going to do is determine the extent of the drawdown that we are having on the battery, and then we're going to go around and try to start isolating and removing circuits in the hopes of finding which circuit it is that's providing or causing that draw. And it could be something as simple as a short on a light somewhere, or something staying on an on position. It could also be the interconnection, very complicated, between the generator, the charge controller in here that also charges the battery for the engine. So this very complicated interconnection of systems. Now, one clue that I will tell you that I did have was when I first got to Reno, as you guys saw in the video, and I hooked up the battery, you could immediately hear, if you were listening closely, or you had sharp ears, you could immediately hear a solenoid or a relay click down somewhere in the coach. So that was my clue at that moment. Something is engaging and closing, not opening, but closing, because it's a magnetic draw when you put current through it. Something is closing, and it's probably in the back of the coach there. So we want to figure out what that could possibly be. So I'm probably going to work very hard today to isolate or separate these two systems from each other so we can find out what it is. But the first thing we need to do is determine the extent of our draw. And while we're at it, let me give this caution. If you don't know what you're doing with electrical systems, it's very easy to take a difficult problem and compound it and make it into an extraordinarily difficult problem by not doing things correctly here. And well, you know, you want to make sure that leads aren't touching where they shouldn't be and things aren't grounded. So I set things up to take precautions so I don't risk any additional damage here. And I want to show you what I do in terms of setting up here. Now I've disconnected, this vehicle is a negative ground, okay? It grounds to the body here. I have disconnected the battery terminal that you can see here, and I've hooked the black lead of my meter here to the negative lead of the battery, and I've hooked a red lead to the battery cable clamp here that you can see here. Very important that this be done on the negative side, because in case something accidentally touches metal against the body, it's a ground to ground, it's not going to do anything. But if I was to do it on this side and accidentally a piece of metal touched the body, I could have a short and make things much worse. So do this testing on the negative or the ground side if you have a negative grounded vehicle. So I have that clamped down and in position, my test leads on there. I've moved the red lead to the amps position. Normally it sticks in the voltage, the ohms for resistance and hertz. You want to put that over to the amp side. And once you turn your meter on, as you'll see here, you turn it all the way over to the amp side. So it's an ammeter really, and you'll see that this vehicle is drawing like 3.7 amps just resting here, just with the battery sitting here overnight. So it's no wonder it drains. This is a catastrophic drawdown. This will drain the battery in about 6 or 7 hours. So no wonder you come out in the morning and you go to start up your vehicle and there's no power left. So what we need to do is figure out what is causing this drawdown, and to do that we want to do things very carefully. We're going to be checking the circuits on the inside of the vehicle, and while this is hooked up, you don't want to open any doors or anything unless you're disabling the light circuits, because or the switches on the doors, because you could have a very big draw that would destroy your meter here. So we want to be very careful. Now I have gone to the back of the coach and I have isolated and pulled all the fuses in here. Get this open here. I've isolated this is to the biggest extent possible by going ahead and pulling the fuses here. And you can see there were fuses that go into this panel right here. I don't know how good my lighting is. I've pulled all the fuses there, and I've put my breakers in a down position, which means I've isolated my generator and my charge controller box with battery charger, the power converter and battery charger. I've isolated that as much as possible except the tie to the front battery here. So I'm going to worry about that later, because that involves crawling under the coach and everything else. So let's just say I've put that in a position where it's not putting a terrific draw, if anything, on the system right now, unless we have a vampire drain over there. Okay, I'm going to close this up here. And remember to disconnect your meter if you're going to open any doors that have switching in them, okay? Because you might blow out your meter. Now I have a fuse panel. Now you say, Rosie, how are you going to isolate those circuits? What we're going to do is pull those fuses one at a time. The fuses that control the forward side or the Econoline side of the van, and if that still doesn't do anything, then we know where our problem is, probably in an interconnection between the charge controller and the front battery charging system here. So, but we need to start eliminating some things first. So let's disconnect our meter so that we can open our door over here without triggering the light coming on, because that'll put an additional draw that'll skew our readings here. So I'm going to go ahead and disconnect this now and block up that door, so the switch on it, so it doesn't come on when I open the door. Now some of you may say, what would be a normal reading for a normal draw? Well, in the setting that we have with amps here on this, it should read basically 0 on here, because amps is a high scale, and your milliamps, you're talking about thousandths of an amp. So it shouldn't even register on here. So that's how we know we'll cure the problem when we have the ability to knock this thing down to 0. I'm going to go ahead and position the meter so I can see it from inside over the windshield there, because I need to be able to read it while I'm pulling fuses here. And this is what we're doing next. I've gone ahead and blocked the switch here, so the switch is effectively deactivated. I need to put my meter in a position where I can read it here from the inside. That way I don't have to jump out and read it every time I do a reading. Well, I'm going to have to pitch forward or something, because that's as far as it really reaches over there. So let me just put it high enough that I can read it. I'm going to check I can read it, and then we'll get underway. It's a little bit tough, but I can read like 3.34 there now. So the next thing we want to do, oops, sorry about the this selfie stick is about had it. The next thing we want to do, you can see the fuse panel here. We want to go ahead and start pulling fuses in a way that we make sure that we pull them one at a time. And each time we pull a fuse, we're going to go ahead and check the meter and see if it made a difference in our reading. And this is the way we're actually isolating circuits here. So I'm going to go ahead and get the puller and get underway with that. I've got a little extra lighting set up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go row by row. Starting on the bottom, I'm going to be pulling these, and let me get my my readout. Let me go grab that. I have a paper, I think, that shows the position. I still don't have any manuals or anything, so I'm just doing this by experience and instinct. So I want to go, gonna go grab the interpretive. This, sometimes they say what the thing is, and other times it says like see owner's manual here. So all right, so I'd like to know what we're pulling when we're testing here. So let me go get that. Got our readout here. You can see the fuse positioning. I believe this is the correct block here. The E250 and 350 should not be a big difference. And then it tells you what's on that circuit. And that way you can read that. So let's go ahead and start pulling and see if it makes a difference here. Really need to use a puller. I'm going to see if I have a little pair of pliers here. You want to be kind of gentle with these. So we'll start with this one, a 20 amp fuse, and we'll see if that made a difference. We'll go up to our meter here and we'll do a reading. And nope, that did not make a difference. We're still at the 3.68, so we could return this one to its proper place. We'll now go ahead. I'm going to work row by row from the bottom up. We'll go ahead and pull this 15 amper here. See if that made a difference in our draw. And nope, we're still the same draw. I'm going to have to re-trigger my meter because it wants to turn off after a while. The auto shut off. So let me go restart that. Alright, so basically we're just going to be going in series to see if any of these circuits, that flashers, turn signals, radio, heater, any of these fuses cause a diminishment in the power draw. About 1/3 of the way through the fuses, and nothing has made a difference so far. Our draw remains the same, so we just continue on. Just be patient, be patient, be patient, one at a time. All of them have been tested. I'm going to look around the rig, make sure there's no more fuse panels up front. And I'm very satisfied that whatever's drawing power has nothing to do with the wiring of the Econoline 250 and everything to do with the interconnection to the charge controller. But that still remains to be seen. Got a backside item to be tested up here too. I'm going to pull that. You can see the silver can up behind there. Okay, let me do that one next. Okay, over to the other side of the coach, and I have disconnected the meter while I open this door here. And what I want to do is give a visual inspection underneath and make sure there's no other fuses, fuse blocks, or anything like that. This is the blower control and air distribution module. I'm going to go ahead and inspect this very carefully over here. I'm going to get the spotlight and make sure I don't see any potential shorts here. This looks good. This looks good. I'm going to go ahead and reinstall this. Make sure our wires are all tucked in there. That's correct. I got butterfingers today. Let's go ahead and add that on there. Make sure we got that snugged in good at the bottom. There we go. Go ahead and tighten her into position. Okay, now it's time to officially welcome you to the deep end of the pool. We've isolated the Econoline 250 part of the electrical system. It seems fine. I'm not surprised. It's kind of rare to have a leak on them. So now we get to the bugaboo of the coach. And of course, I don't have a wiring diagram, but it's pretty basic what goes on here. And I've had the sofa lifted up here because this is the area where all the electric comes in. You can see the landline feed is the thick cord. It doesn't have the ribbing on it. This is our charge controller and our transfer switch. And I kind of half suspect our issues going to be with this, that this gave up the ghost. So the only way I can effectively do anything, although I've pulled all the fuses on the front panels, all the fuses that went into here, and all of our breakers are down, it's still drawing somewhere in here. So something's coming into here and finding some sort of ground before it even gets to that panel. So I'm going to start poking around. I want to find out, it has a battery charging cable that goes up to the battery too. When you're on a landline, it charges the battery while you're parked and keeps that topped up for you. So I'm going to need to figure that out too. So I'm going to drop back and punt a little bit, start taking this thing apart and see what I can find out. Goody, rat shit everywhere. Just what you like to see. Somebody had a nice home in here. So anyway, I've pulled out the landline out the side door of the coach there. As far as that will go. So now I'm studying what I can. I don't have a wiring diagram, but I'm picking up clues. You can see some writing down there. The grounding and things. Of course, we have two hots coming in here, two neutrals, and a equipment ground. So somewhere in here, the functioning of this is you have two different potential power sources coming into this controller. Now, when they come in, one of the power sources is from a landline if you're hooked up through the coach. The other one is through the generator. And I'm trying to first determine the hookups and isolate the problem that it could be. So it's going to be the interconnection in this box here. And that's what I'm going to be focusing on, studying that a little more. I have a lot of excess wiring around here, and I just need to trace things through to get familiar with it. You might say, have you started the generator up? No, I've not put any power on to the coach part. of the vehicle at all, because I don't want to risk a catastrophic short circuit. So I need to find where the problem is before I do anything. There's the water pump there. I suspect after several years of sitting, that might have to be replaced. So on and on we go. Believe it or not, this is the first time I've actually had the generator compartment open here. And you can see how clean this is. Definitely just 25, 35 and a half hours, whatever it was. This has been one lightly used generator, so I'm happy. So I'm working now to check back connections from the generator. This is the distribution. It looks like I'm checking the inputs and the outputs here. Sort of making sure everything is okay visually as far as I can tell here. Back there for the distribution. Checking all these connections, making sure there's no shorts or anything like that. So it's unusual that this would have a neutral on a ground, but I guess it looks factory to me, so I'm not going to mess around with that. Just going to continue my visual because I already know the generator works. All right. It'll take a while to get back into condition again. That sounds real good. That sounds really good. That makes me really happy. So I'm going to do some measurements here and make sure this is, check this box. I'm going to make sure this is the output side. A few things running around. Probably one is to the switch on the inside. I'm going to go ahead and confirm that now. That's what that was. That is wired back to the switch. So next thing I want to do is make sure I'm getting output here. That's beautiful. Beautiful. 35 and a half hours. I am psyched. All right, we've been at it about 2 hours so far. I know it seems frustrating when you're watching because there's so many things that you have to test. There's so many interconnections that you have to test. But in a way, it's really a very simple circuit. When you think about it, you have two sources that bring power into the coach. You have the landline, and then you have the generator. And once the power is brought in, you can think of two pipes coming in. There's a distribution system that takes and converts that 120 volts AC and converts that for 12 volt distribution, and some 120 for maybe a microwave and an air conditioner and things like that. But in this case, I think the bugaboo may be something to do with the cable running up to the battery in the front, that either we have a bad solenoid or something like that. So it's time now, after doing all we've done, to isolate the converter back there where the battery comes into that converter box that provides charging for the battery when you're on landline or you're on generator. We've got our meter hooked up once again. We still have our leak here. It's about 2.4, slightly better, but not because of anything we've done here. Just got our make sure our probes are good and tight there. And now we're going to go back here and we're going to totally isolate this converter box from the battery here. Okay. And I've now removed, I had that lead on, and now I've removed that, because if you look at the panel here, this tells you that the C position here is for the positive lead of the 12 volt battery. Okay, and then you have the negative leads, of one of which is the 12 volt battery. So let's go ahead and totally isolate that now. Okay, I've gone ahead and isolated that battery interconnection to the best of my ability in here. So now it's time to go out and check our reading now and see what we get. And there it is, guys. There's the tail of the meter right there. We're all perfectly hooked up on our connections. And look at that. We got zero draw right now. So isolating that battery connection somewhere between the coming up from the back, and I guess this is it right here. That's the flaw of the system. So worst comes to worst, I may just run a new one back there, but for right now I want to remove that and do a bit more testing here. But I am very happy to see that now, because that's isolated my problem. Actually found a place where the sheathing had rubbed off on the cable, and I've now taped that up really well and reinstalled that battery linkage there, and we have it back on our test bench again. And I'm happy to report that we have a zero draw now, which is exactly what we want to see. So I think we've earned some lunch. What do you think? Let's get in. We ain't done yet. We got to figure out why we're not getting a charge on the battery. We now know why we're having a drain, a vampire drain. But guys, that's half the battle today. We got to get this coach charging up when this engine's running, right? So, all right, we got our work cut out for us.